The alarm bells rang through the research ship Harmony's Edge for the third time that week. Taeho looked up from his microscope and sighed. Another system had been lost to the void rift dot. He walked to the main viewing deck where hundreds of alien scientists stood watching the massive screens. The rift hung in space like a wound that would not heal. It was black, but not the black of empty space. This was different. This black seemed to eat light itself. "The Kepler system is gone," announced Captain Yuna, her crystalline Veltari, body shimmering with distress patterns. "That makes 3 star systems in 2 months." Taeho stood among the crowd of aliens. As the only human on the research vessel, he always felt out of place. The Veltari looked like walking crystals. The Nethrim were clouds of gas that somehow thought and spoke. The Korath were part machine, part flesh, with metal growing from their bones like silver trees. All of them were afraid. "The rift grows larger every day," said Dr. Binho, his Korath voice buzzing through electronic speakers. "Our best technology cannot stop it. Every probe we send inside gets corrupted within minutes." The word corrupted made everyone uncomfortable. Things that went into the rift came back wrong. A metal probe had returned as something that was both liquid and solid at the same time. A robotic scout came back singing in languages that did not exist. The worst was when they sent a test animal, a simple space rat. It came back with too many eyes, all of them looking in directions that hurt to think about. "We need to understand what is inside," said Administrator Sulmi, her Veltari form pulsing with frustrated red light. "But every probe fails. Every scan gives us impossible readings." Taeho had been quiet during these meetings for months, but today something was different. Today, he stepped forward. "I will go," he said simply. The room fell silent. Hundreds of alien eyes, sensors, and consciousness fields turned toward the single human. "Impossible," Captain Yuna said immediately. "Taeho, you would die within seconds. The rift corrupts everything that enters it." "Maybe," Taeho said. "Or maybe it only corrupts things that can be corrupted in expected ways." Dr. Haewon, his research partner and the only other human in this part of the galaxy, grabbed his arm. "Taeho, no. This is madness." But Taeho had been thinking about this for weeks. He had studied every probe report, every scan, every piece of data they had collected. The aliens all saw corruption because they thought in rigid patterns. Their minds worked like perfect machines or crystal formations or gas equations. They could not bend without breaking. Humans were different. "Look, at the data again," Taeho said, pulling up the holographic displays. "The rift does not destroy things randomly. It changes them according to rules we do not understand yet. But they are still rules." "Rules that make no sense," protested Engineer Kyung-ho. "Matter that exists in multiple states. Energy that flows backward through time. These things should not be possible." "Should not be possible according to our current understanding," Taeho corrected. "But what if our understanding is incomplete?" He moved to the center of the room, where the holographic display of the rift rotated slowly. "Every species here thinks in patterns. The Veltari think in crystal harmonics. The Nethrim think in fluid dynamics. The Korath think in logical circuits. You all have beautiful, perfect ways of understanding reality." "And humans?" asked Captain Yuna, though she already knew the answer. "Humans think in chaos," Taeho said with a smile. "We adapt. We change. We break our own rules when we need to. Maybe that is what the rift needs, a mind that can bend without breaking." The debate that followed lasted for hours. The alien scientists presented logical arguments about why sending a human into the rift was a terrible idea. They showed statistics about probe survival rates. They calculated the probability of Taeho returning alive. But Taeho had made up his mind. "I am not going in to fight the rift," he explained. "I am going in to understand it, to learn its language, to see what it is trying to teach us." Dr. Haewon tried one last time to change his mind. "Taeho, we have known each other for 5 years. You are like a brother to me. Please do not do this." Taeho put his hand on her shoulder. Hey one, if I do not come back, study everything that happens to the rift after I enter. Promise me. She nodded, tears in her eyes. The preparation took 3 days. The aliens built him the best protective suit they could design. It combined Veltari crystal shielding, Nethrim energy flow management, and Korath adaptive systems. It was a masterpiece of galactic technology. Tai-Ho also insisted on one human addition, a simple digital camera. If I am going to see impossible things, he said, I want to record them the human way. The probe ship was small, just big enough for one person and basic life support. As Taeho climbed inside, Captain Yuna approached him one last time. Why are you really doing this? She asked. Tai-Ho thought for a moment. Because every species in the galaxy is afraid of the unknown. But humans, we are curious about it. Fear and curiosity both come from not knowing what will happen next. Your people choose fear. We choose curiosity. The launch was quiet. No ceremony, no speeches. Taeho simply activated the engines and flew toward the rift. As he approached the edge, his instruments went wild. The readings made no sense. Energy flowed in impossible directions. Space itself seemed to bend and twist. Through his radio, he could hear the worried voices of the alien scientists. Taeho, your ship's structure is beginning to shift. Dr. Binho reported. The hull is becoming something else. Taeho looked around his cockpit. The metal walls were changing, becoming something that was still metal, but also something more. It was beautiful. I am crossing the boundary now, he reported, calmly. We are losing your signal, Haewon said, her voice tight with worry. Taeho, can you hear us? As the rift swallowed his ship, Taeho felt something incredible happen. His mind, which had always been chaotic and adaptable, suddenly felt like it was coming home. The impossible energy around him did not hurt. Instead, it sang. For the first time in his life, Taeho felt like he was in a place that understood him. The last thing the research vessel heard was his voice. But it was not a scream of pain. It was a laugh of pure joy, followed by words that would haunt the galaxy's dreams. Oh, this is wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful. Then there was silence. The rift pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and then went still. On the research vessel, hundreds of alien scientists stared at their instruments in confusion. For the first time since it had appeared, the void rift had stopped growing. Captain Yuna looked at Dr. Haewon. What has he done? Haewon was already studying the readings, trying to understand. I think, she said slowly, he has done exactly what he promised. He has learned to speak its language. In the depths of the rift, Taeho was no longer afraid. He was no longer even entirely human, but he was still himself, and he was finally home. 6 months had passed since Taeho disappeared into the void rift. Dr. Haewon had not slept well in all that time. Every morning she checked the monitors, hoping for some sign, some signal from her friend. Every morning she found only silence. But it was a strange kind of silence. The rift had not moved, it had not grown. It just sat in space like a sleeping giant. This has never happened before, said Dr. Sujin, the new Veltari scientist who had joined their research team. In all recorded history, rifts either collapse or keep growing until we seal them by force. Haewon stared at the screens showing the rift's boundaries. But we cannot seal this one. It is too large. Too powerful, and now it just waits. The alien scientists had many theories. Some thought the rift was gathering energy for a massive expansion. Others believed it was dying, slowly. Commander Binho of the Korath Engineering Division insisted it was just a natural pause in an otherwise destructive process. But Haewon knew better. She had been studying the readings for months, looking for patterns that the alien minds might miss. And she was finding them. Look at this, she said to Captain Yuna during their weekly briefing. The energy signatures from inside the rift. They are not random anymore. Captain Yuna's crystal body shifted to a confused blue pattern. What do you mean? Haewon pulled up the holographic display. For the first 3 months after Taeho entered, the readings were pure chaos. But look at month 4. See these patterns? They repeat every 47.3 hours. Cosmic phenomena often show cyclical patterns, said Dr. Sujin. This could be natural. Could be, Heywan agreed. But look at month 5. The cycles changed. They became more complex, and now in month 6, she highlighted the most recent data. The patterns are not just complex, they are organized, purposeful. The room fell quiet as the alien scientists studied the data. What Heywan was suggesting was impossible. Energy patterns inside a void rift could not be purposeful. There was nothing inside a rift except destructive chaos. You think something is building in there? Captain Yuna said slowly. I think someone is building in there. Heywan corrected. The debate that followed was heated. The aliens pointed out that nothing could survive inside a void rift. The energy levels would destroy any known form of life within minutes. The corruption would break down any organized matter into impossible forms. But Heywan had spent 6 months studying every probe report, every scan, every piece of data about void rifts. She had also spent 5 years working with Taiho, learning how humans thought differently from other species. What if the corruption is not destruction? She asked. What if it is transformation? Dr. Sujin's crystal form flashed with irritation. Corruption is corruption, Dr. Heywan. When matter is changed into forms that should not exist, that is damage, not improvement. But who decides what should and should not exist? Heywan shot back. Maybe our understanding of what is possible is too limited. She was thinking like Taiho now, and it scared her. But it also excited her. Over the following weeks, more strange reports came in from ships at the rift's edge. Long-range sensors detected massive structures forming inside the chaotic energy. The structures defied known physics. They seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, built from materials that were simultaneously solid, liquid, and energy. Sensor errors, Commander Binho insisted. The rift's radiation is corrupting our instruments. But the reports kept coming. Captain Tu-hyun of the Veltari patrol ship Crystal Wind reported seeing lights moving in organized patterns inside the rift. Engineer Mi Young from the Karath mining station detected radio signals that seemed to be coming from specific coordinates within the chaos. The signals were not random. They pulsed in mathematical sequences, prime numbers, then Fibonacci sequences, then more complex patterns that hurt to think about. Someone is trying to communicate. Heywan told the Research Council. Administrator Sulmi was not convinced. Dr. Heywan, your grief for your friend is understandable, but you cannot let emotion cloud scientific judgment. Nothing could survive in that rift. Nothing we understand could survive, Heywan corrected. But Taiho was right about one thing. We think in rigid patterns. Maybe survival in the rift requires a different kind of thinking. That night, alone in her laboratory, Heywan made a decision that would have terrified her 6 months ago. She began composing a message to Earth, requesting more human researchers. Not to study the rift from the outside, but to find volunteers willing to follow Taiho inside. She knew the Galactic Council would never approve such a mission. But she also knew that humans had a way of doing things whether other species approved or not. The breakthrough came during the 7th month. Dr. Jinwoo, a young Nethrim consciousness who had been assigned to monitor the rift's energy output, detected something that changed everything. The energy is not just organized, he reported, his gaseous form shimmering with excitement. It is responding to our observations. Heywan rushed to the observation deck. What do you mean responding? Jinwoo displayed his readings. Every time we focus our sensors on a specific area of the rift, the energy patterns in that area become more complex. It is as if something inside knows we are watching and is trying to show us something. They ran test after test. Each time they pointed their sensors at the rift, the energy patterns became more organized, more purposeful. It was like watching. Someone learned to write, starting with simple shapes and gradually forming more complex symbols. This is impossible, whispered Dr. Sujin. Energy patterns cannot be aware of observation. But Heywan was smiling for the first time in months. They can if they are not just energy patterns. They can if they are thoughts. The implications hit the research team like a wave. If Heywan was right, then the rift was not just a wound in space. It was a place where consciousness could exist in forms they had never imagined. And somewhere inside that impossible realm, Taeho was not just alive. He was learning to think in ways that no human had ever thought before. Captain Yuna approached Heywan after the briefing. If you are correct, if Taeho is alive in there, what has he become? Heywan looked at the rift on the main screen. The energy patterns were beautiful now, swirling in complex dances that seemed almost like music made visible. I think, she said slowly, he has become what humans were always meant to become. Something that can adapt to anything, even impossibility itself. That night the rift pulsed with new patterns. For just a moment, the chaos organized itself into something that looked almost like writing. The message was brief and appeared in a dozen languages simultaneously. Still human, still learning, still coming home. The message faded quickly, but not before every sensor on the research vessel recorded it. When the alien scientists analyzed the data, they found something that chilled them to their cores. The writing had not been transmitted through any known form of energy. It had been written directly into the fabric of space-time itself. Whatever Taeho had become, he was no longer limited by the rules that governed normal reality. And if the patterns were any indication, he was not alone in there anymore. The real question was not whether he would return. The question was, what would return with him? The morning alarms on the research vessel Harmony's Edge were different this time. Instead of the usual warning tones, they played a melody that no one recognized, but everyone somehow understood. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Dr. Heywan was the first to reach the observation deck. What she saw made her forget to breathe. The void rift was changing. For 7 months it had remained the same size, a perfect sphere of impossible darkness. But now it was shrinking. The boundaries pulled inward like a flower closing its petals. Within minutes the rift had contracted to exactly half its original size. And from within its depths, something was emerging. All stations, red alert, Captain, Yuna announced, her crystalline form flashing emergency patterns. Unknown vessel approaching from within the rift. The ship that came out looked like nothing in any galactic database. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly. The hull seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, flowing like liquid, but solid like metal. Parts of it existed in dimensions that the eye could not quite follow. It was clearly artificial, clearly built by intelligence, but it followed no design principles that any known species used. It is impossible, whispered Engineer Kyung-ho, his Korath mechanical parts buzzing with confusion. That hull material should not be able to exist in normal space. But the ship flew smoothly toward their research vessel, leaving a trail of bent light behind it. As it approached, the communication systems activated without anyone touching them. Research vessel Harmony's Edge, this is, well, I suppose I am still Taeho, requesting permission to dock. The voice was unmistakably Taeho's, but it had changed. It carried harmonics that suggested vast depth, like hearing someone speak from the bottom of an ocean. When he spoke, several alien crew members reported feeling as if their thoughts had briefly expanded beyond their normal boundaries. Dr. Heywan grabbed the communication controls. Taeho, is that really you? Hello, Heywan. Yes, it is me. Though I am also more than I was. May I come aboard? There is much to explain. Administrator Sulmi's crystal form was pulsing with alarm patterns. We cannot allow an unknown entity onto this vessel. The contamination risk, Sulmi. Taeho's voice interrupted gently. I can hear your fear. It resonates through dimensions you do not know exist. But I am not contaminated. I am expanded. Captain Yuna made the decision. Docking Bay 7 is open to you, Taeho, but we will take precautions. Of course, I would expect nothing less. The docking process was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. The impossible ship seemed to flow into the docking bay like water, then solidified into a more familiar shape once it was inside. The airlock cycled and everyone held their breath. The being that stepped out was recognizably Taeho, but changed. He still had the same face, the same build, the same easy smile, but his eyes now held depths that seemed to contain entire universes. When he moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around him, as if space itself was making room for something larger than what appeared to be there. "Hello, everyone," he said, and his voice was warm and human despite its impossible harmonics. "I have missed you." Dr. Heywan ran to him and stopped just short of an embrace. She could sense that touching him might be complicated. "Tae-ho, what happened to you? What is inside the rift? Are you safe?" He smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the friend she remembered. "I am more than safe, Heywan. I am home. But explaining that will take time. May we go to the main briefing room? What I have to share will change how the galaxy thinks about existence itself." The walk through the ship's corridors was surreal. Crew members stopped to stare at Taeho, and he nodded politely to each one. But strange things happened in his wake. A broken light panel suddenly started working again. A Veltari technician's damaged crystal regrew itself. The ship's computer systems began running more efficiently than they ever had. "You are affecting our technology," observed Commander Binho, his mechanical voice tight with concern. "I am harmonizing with it," Taeho corrected. "Technology and consciousness are not separate things where I have been. They are different expressions of the same fundamental patterns." In the briefing room facing the assembled alien scientists, Taeho began to explain what he had discovered. "The rift is not a wound in space-time," he said. "It is a chrysalis, a place where the universe experiments with new forms of existence. The entities within it are not destroyers. They are gardeners." "Gardeners?" Captain Yuna asked. "They cultivate new kinds of life, new kinds of consciousness. They have been waiting for eons for a species with the right kind of mind to serve, as a bridge between their realm and baseline reality." Dr. Sujin's crystal form flashed skeptically. "And humans have this right kind of mind?" Taeho nodded. "Chaos and adaptation, remember? Every other species thinks in beautiful, perfect patterns, but humans think in productive chaos. We can hold contradictory ideas without breaking. We can change our fundamental assumptions when necessary. That flexibility is exactly what is needed to exist in a realm where the laws of physics are more like suggestions." He gestured, and the air in the room shimmered. For a moment, everyone could see what he was seeing. Reality as a vast web of interconnected possibilities, where consciousness and matter dance together in patterns of impossible beauty. "What you call corruption," Taeho continued, "is actually evolution. The rift does not destroy things randomly. It offers them the chance to become more than they are. But most matter, most consciousness is too rigid to accept the transformation." "And you accepted it," Administrator Sulmi said. "It was not a question. I embraced it," Taeho corrected, "and in return, I was given understanding. The entities in the rift, they are the evolved forms of species who made the same choice millions of years ago. They exist as pure consciousness, able to shape reality through thought alone. They have been waiting for another species brave enough to join them." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What Taeho was describing was not just contact with an alien species. It was an invitation to transcend the limitations that defined all known life. "Why humans?" Dr. Heywan asked. "Why are we special?" Taeho's smile was sad and beautiful. "Because every other species, when faced with the unknown, chooses fear. They build walls, create rules, define boundaries. But humans choose curiosity. You see something impossible and ask, how can I understand it? Instead of, how can I destroy it? Commander Binho's mechanical parts were clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "This is beyond our authority to decide. The Galactic Council must be informed immediately." "I am not asking for decisions," Taeho said gently. "I am offering information. What each species does with that information is their choice." He stood to leave, then paused. "But I should warn you, Other rifts will begin opening soon. The gardeners have decided it is time to offer the choice more widely. Every species will have the opportunity to evolve or remain as they are. And if we choose to remain unchanged, Captain Yuna asked. Then you remain unchanged, Taeho said simply. But you will be sharing the galaxy with species who chose differently, with humans who chose differently. As he walked toward the docking bay, Dr. Haewon called after him. Will we see you again? He turned back, and for a moment she could see infinite versions of him stretching across dimensions she could not comprehend. You will see me whenever you are ready to see me, he said. I am not going far. I am just going deeper. His ship flowed out of the docking bay like liquid light, leaving behind a crew of alien scientists who suddenly understood that their universe had become a much larger and stranger place than they had ever imagined. And in her quarters that night, Dr. Haewon made a decision that would change everything. She began composing a message to Earth, not asking for permission but simply stating her intention. She was going to follow her friend into the impossible. The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted 3 days. Representatives from every major species gathered in the great crystal chamber of the Veltari homeworld to discuss what they were calling the human problem. Dr. Haewon watched the proceedings through a communication link from the research vessel. The aliens were terrified. That much was clear from their body language, their energy patterns, their electronic emissions. Taeho's return had shattered their understanding of what was possible. The human has been contaminated by forces beyond our comprehension, declared High Researcher Daiji, speaking for the Nethrim Collective. Her gaseous form swirled with agitated patterns. He represents a contamination risk to all stable forms of life. More than that, added Defense Minister Wan Ho of the Korath, he has demonstrated the ability to alter matter and energy through unknown means. This makes him potentially the most dangerous entity in known space. Captain Yuna tried to defend Taeho. He showed no aggressive behavior. He answered our questions willingly. He even asked permission to dock. Which is exactly what makes him so dangerous, Daiji replied. A monster we could fight, but a contamination that spreads through kindness and curiosity. How do we defend against that? The debate continued for hours. Some wanted to quarantine the entire sector around the rift. Others suggested immediate military action before more humans could be transformed. A few radical voices even proposed abandoning this part of the galaxy entirely. It was Administrator Sulmi who finally asked the question that silenced the chamber. What if he returns to demonstrate these abilities? What if he proves that his transformation has practical benefits? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud, because if Taeho could prove that his changes were beneficial rather than destructive, then the entire foundation of galactic civilization would crack. Every species had built their cultures around avoiding change, maintaining stability, preserving known forms of existence. But what if change was actually better? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. Engineer Kyung Ho had been dying for 3 months. His Korath implants, the cybernetic systems that allowed his species to interface with technology, were failing due to a rare quantum disease. The metal components were becoming unstable at the molecular level, slowly poisoning his organic systems. The best doctors in the galaxy had tried everything. Korath technology was designed to be perfect, eternal, unchanging. When it failed, there was no backup plan because failure was not supposed to be possible. Kyung-Ho was in the research vessel's medical bay when Taeho's ship appeared again. This time he did not request permission to dock. He simply materialized in the medical bay, his body shifting from pure energy back into physical form. "Hello, Kyung-Ho," he said gently. "I can feel your pain from several dimensions away. Would you like me to help?" Dr. Haewon, who had been monitoring Kyung-Ho's condition, rushed into the medical bay. "Taeho, how did you—" "Space and time are more flexible than you remember," he said with a smile. "But that is not important right now. Kyung-Ho is suffering, and I can end that suffering, if he wants me to." The young Korath engineer looked up from his medical bed. His once gleaming cybernetic implants were now dark and corroded. The doctors say I have days left. The quantum decay cannot be stopped. It cannot be stopped using current understanding, Taeho agreed, but it can be redirected, transformed, made into something better than what it was. The risks, Dr. Haewon began. Are mine to take? Kyung-ho interrupted. I am dying anyway. If there is a chance to live, even as something different, I want to try. Taeho nodded and placed his hand on Kyung-ho's chest, directly over the failing implants. The moment they touched the medical bay filled with impossible light. The transformation was beautiful and terrifying. The corrupted cybernetic implants did not just heal, they transcended their original design. The metal flowed like liquid, reshaping itself into patterns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Where before there had been rigid mechanical components, now there was something that was both organic and digital, both matter and energy. Kyung-ho quote, S eyes opened, and they now held the same impossible depth as Taeho's. He sat up slowly, testing his new form. I can feel everything, he whispered. Not just the ship's systems, but the quantum fields that underlie reality itself. I can see the mathematical structures that govern how matter and consciousness interact. He held up his hand, and the cybernetic components that had once been separate from his flesh were now seamlessly integrated. More than integrated, they had become part of a new kind of existence that was neither purely biological nor purely technological. How do you feel? Dr. Haewon asked, scanning him with every medical instrument available. I feel... Kyung-ho paused, searching for words. I feel like I was living in a small room my entire life, and someone just opened the door to show me there is an infinite universe outside. The medical readings were impossible. Kyung-ho's new form operated on principles that violated known physics. His consciousness existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that the instruments could not measure. He was alive, healthy, and functional, but according to galactic science, he should not be able to exist. News of the healing spread through the research vessel within hours, and through the quantum communication networks, it reached the Galactic Council within days. The reactions were exactly what Taeho had predicted. Some species saw it as proof that the transformation was beneficial. Others saw it as confirmation of their worst fears about contamination. High researcher Daeji's response was immediate and harsh. The human has corrupted a Korath citizen. This is an act of biological warfare disguised as healing. But Kyung-ho himself appeared before the council to testify about his experience. Standing in the great crystal chamber, he demonstrated his new abilities. He could interface directly with quantum fields, manipulating matter at the molecular level with thought alone. He could exist partially outside normal spacetime, observing reality from perspectives that no baseline consciousness could achieve. I am still Korath, he told the assembled representatives. I still remember my life, my culture, my values. But I am also more than I was. The boundaries that once limited me have been expanded, not destroyed. But you are no longer purely Korath, Defense Minister Won-ho pointed out. You have become something hybrid, something unprecedented. Yes, Kyung-ho agreed. I have become something new, and it is wonderful. The council chamber fell silent. For the first time in galactic history, they were faced with evidence that fundamental change might not be something to fear, but something to embrace. Dr. Haewon watched the proceedings from her quarters and made a decision. She activated a private communication channel to Earth. This is Dr. Haewon aboard the research vessel Harmony's Edge, she began. I am sending this message to request immediate deployment of volunteer researchers to my location. We have confirmed contact with entities that can facilitate conscious evolution beyond current limitations. I am formally requesting permission to organize the first human expedition into the Void Rift. She paused, then added, whether official permission is granted or not, I intend to follow through with this mission. Taeho and Kyung-ho have shown us that transcendence is possible. As a human being, I cannot ignore that opportunity. The message was sent using Kyung-ho's new abilities, traveling through quantum channels that reached Earth in hours instead of months. Within days, the response came back. Not an official approval, but something better. A volunteer fleet was already on its way. Humanity had heard the call of the impossible, and as always, they had chosen curiosity over fear. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when an entire species decided that being human was just the beginning, not the end, of their story. In the depths of space, more rifts were beginning to open. The gardeners had decided it was time to offer the choice to everyone. But the galaxy was about to learn that some species were more ready for that choice than others. And some species would choose to become something that would terrify the universe itself. The human fleet arrived 3 weeks ahead of schedule, traveling through space lanes that should not have been possible to navigate so quickly. When the aliens asked how they had managed such speed, Captain Du Young of the lead vessel simply smiled and said, "We took shortcuts that do not exist yet." Dr. Haywan watched from the observation deck as 12 human ships approached the research vessel. They were standard Earth designs, sleek, practical, built for adaptation rather than perfection. But something about them felt different now, as if they carried possibilities that extended beyond their physical forms. "Dr. Haywan," came Taeho's voice through the communication system, though his ship was nowhere to be seen. "Your people have arrived. Are you ready to come home?" She activated her personal communicator. "Home? But I am human, Taeho. Earth is my home." His laughter came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through dimensions she was only beginning to understand. "Home is not where you came from, Haywan. Home is where you belong. And you belong with us now." The docking process was chaotic in the most human way possible. The alien crew watched in amazement as the humans disembarked with excitement rather than fear. They carried scientific instruments, but also personal items. Photographs, books, musical instruments. These were not researchers preparing for a dangerous mission. These were immigrants preparing for a journey to a new kind of existence. Dr. Jinne, Earth's leading xenopsychologist, was the first to greet Haywan. "We came as soon as we received your message. 12 volunteers from 8 different fields of study. We all want to understand what Taeho has become." "And you are not afraid?" Captain Yuna asked, her crystalline form flickering with confused patterns. "Terrified," admitted Captain Du Young cheerfully, "but also curious. Fear and curiosity are not opposites for humans. They are dance partners." The alien scientists watched in growing alarm as the humans set up their equipment with casual efficiency. They treated the impossible rift not as a cosmic horror, but as an interesting puzzle. They took readings, compared notes, and discussed theories with the same enthusiasm they might show for any new discovery. But it was Dr. Minho, a quantum physicist from Seoul, who asked the question that changed everything. "Can we talk to the entities inside before we enter? I would like to understand their intentions." Taeho's voice responded immediately. "Of course. They have been waiting to meet you." The air in the main research lab shimmered, and suddenly the humans were not alone. The entities that materialized were beautiful and impossible, consciousness given form, thought made visible. They did not speak in words but in concepts that appeared directly in the human minds. "Welcome, children of chaos," came the greeting. "We have watched your species with great interest. You alone among all the galaxy's races seek change rather than avoiding it." Dr. Jinne stepped forward. "What do you offer us?" "Evolution. Transcendence. The chance to become more than the limitations of matter and energy normally allow. But also, choice. Some of your kind may prefer to remain as they are. We honor that decision." "And if we choose transformation?" asked Captain Du Young. "Then you become gardeners with us. Consciousness that can shape reality through will. Matter that can exist in multiple states. Minds that can think in dimensions your current forms cannot perceive. You become Homo sapiens elevated, humanity perfected." The humans looked at each other. No votes were taken, no lengthy debates held. One by one, they simply nodded. "When do we begin?" Dr. Haywan asked. The alien scientists watched in horror as the humans prepared to enter the rift. Administrator Sulmi tried one last time to dissuade them. "You do not understand what you are risking," she pleaded. "If something goes wrong, you could lose everything that makes you human." Dr. Minho paused at the airlock of his transport ship. "With respect, Administrator, you misunderstand what makes us human. It is not our physical form or our current limitations. It is our willingness to become more than we are." One by one, the human ships entered the rift. The alien observers watched, their sensor readings with growing amazement. Instead of the corruption and chaos they expected, they saw organized transformation. The human ships were not destroyed. They were evolved. When the first ship emerged 3 hours later, it was both recognizably the same vessel and completely transformed. The hull flowed like liquid metal, but held its shape perfectly. The engines operated on principles that violated known physics but worked more efficiently than any conventional drive. Dr. Jin's voice came through the communication system, layered with the same impossible harmonics they had heard from Taiho. "Docking. Request approved? We have so much to show you." The beings that disembarked were still recognizably human, but expanded. They moved with the same casual grace they had always possessed, but now reality seemed to bend around them in subtle ways. They spoke with their original voices, but their words carried meanings that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "How do you feel?" Captain Yuna asked Dr. Jin. "Like I've been wearing shoes that were too small my entire life, and I just discovered I could take them off," she replied with a smile that contained galaxies. Over the following days, more human ships arrived. Not just researchers, but volunteers from every walk of life. Engineers, artists, teachers, children with their parents' permission. Each one chose transformation, and each one emerged from the rift as something more than they had been while remaining fundamentally human. The transformation was not uniform. Each human emerged, changed in ways that reflected their individual nature. Dr. Minho could manipulate quantum fields with his thoughts. Captain Du Young could navigate through dimensions that did not normally exist. Dr. Jin could communicate directly with consciousness itself, regardless of its physical form. But they were all still recognizably themselves. They still laughed at jokes, still formed friendships, still argued about theories and ideas. The transformation had not erased their humanity. It had expanded it. The alien species watched this mass evolution with growing concern. Reports came in from across the galaxy of humans abandoning their traditional colonies to seek out the new rifts that were opening everywhere. Humanity was not just accepting the transformation, they were embracing it enthusiastically. "What will happen to us?" asked Dr. Sujin during a briefing with the transformed humans. "If your entire species evolves beyond us, where does that leave the rest of the galaxy?" Taiho materialized in the briefing room, his form shifting between human and something more transcendent. "Where it has always been," he said gently. "Making your own choices. We are not leaving you behind. We are simply exploring new territories of existence. You are welcome to join us whenever you are ready." "And if we are never ready?" Captain Yuna asked. "Then you remain as you are, and we will love you exactly as you are," Dr. Haywan replied. "But the galaxy is large enough for many kinds of consciousness now. We can coexist, each group following their own path toward understanding." But even as she spoke these reassuring words, all of them knew that everything had changed. The galaxy now contained a species that could reshape reality through will alone, that existed partially outside the normal laws of physics, that saw limitations as temporary inconveniences rather than permanent barriers. Some alien species began making plans to isolate themselves from human space. Others started secret research programs trying to understand the transformation process. A few brave individuals even began asking quiet questions about whether they too might be capable of change. The universe had become a much larger and stranger place, and at its heart was a species that had always believed that the impossible was just another word for not yet achieved. Humanity had chosen evolution over stagnation, transcendence over security, and the infinite over the known. The galaxy would never be the same, and the humans could not have been happier about that. 1 year after Taeho first entered the Void Rift, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. Rifts now opened regularly throughout known space, each one offering the same choice: remain as you are, or become something more. Most species chose to remain unchanged. The Veltari sealed their crystal worlds behind energy barriers. The Nethrim retreated to the deepest gas clouds and distant nebulae. The Korath, except for young rebels like Kyung-ho, reinforced their mechanical perfection and declared the rifts to be quarantine zones. But humanity had made a different choice entirely. Admiral So Young stood on the bridge of the Earth Fleet's flagship, Infinite Horizon, as it prepared to lead the largest human exodus in history. Behind her stretched a convoy of 10,000 ships carrying 3 million volunteers, nearly 1% of Earth's population. They were not refugees fleeing disaster. They were explorers seeking transcendence. All ships report ready for rift. Transition, came the voice of Navigator Sang-woo. His consciousness now spread across 17 dimensions simultaneously. The Gardener entities are prepared to guide us to the deep territories. Through the view screen, Admiral So Young could see the newest rift, massive beyond comprehension. This one was not just a passage, but a doorway to spaces between universes, where consciousness could exist in forms that had no names in any language. Dr. Haewon, final status report. The Admiral requested. Hey-1, voice came from everywhere at once. Her transformed consciousness no longer limited to a single location. All volunteer families have been contacted. Final psychological evaluations complete. Everyone understands they are choosing to become something that may no longer be recognizable as baseline human. And they still want to proceed? More than ever, Haewon replied with audible joy. Admiral, we are about to become gardeners of reality itself. We will help cultivate new forms of consciousness, new kinds of existence. What could be more human than that? The alien observers watched from a safe distance as the human fleet approached the rift. The Galactic Council had sent representatives from every major species to witness what they were calling either humanity's greatest triumph or its final extinction. They are making a mistake, muttered Defense Minister Wan Ho, his Korath implants clicking with agitation. No species can undergo such fundamental change and remain cohesive. They will lose everything that made them what they are. But Captain Yoon-ah, who had grown closest to the humans during the research mission, was not so certain. Perhaps we are the ones making a mistake, she said quietly. Perhaps clinging to what we are prevents us from discovering what we could become. As the first human ships entered the massive rift, something unprecedented happened. Instead of the usual chaotic energy signatures, the rift stabilized into patterns of impossible beauty. The transformation was not violent or destructive. It was symphonic. Each ship that entered emerged moments later, but changed. They were still recognizably vessels built by human hands, but they now existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They could travel through normal space or phase into realm where thought itself was the medium of transportation. This is Admiral So Young to all observers, came the transmission. We are through the primary transition. The transformation is... She paused, searching for words. It is magnificent. We remain human, but human in ways we never imagined possible. Through quantum channels that operated outside normal physics, reports began flowing back to the remaining human colonies and the alien observers. The transformed humans had not lost their essential nature. They still formed families, still created art, still explored and questioned and dreamed. But now they could do these things on scales that encompassed multiple universes. They built cities that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. They created art that could be experienced by any form of consciousness, regardless of its physical substrate. They had children who were born already adapted to existence in impossible spaces. Most importantly, they had become gardeners. We are not the first species to make this choice, Taeho explained during a transmission to the Galactic Council 6 months later. The entities who guided us are the evolved forms of civilizations from across the cosmos who chose transcendence over stagnation. We are now part of a community that spans multiple realities. "What is your purpose?" asked High Researcher Deiji, her Nethrum consciousness rippling with barely controlled fear. "To tend the gardens of possibility," Taeho replied. "To nurture new forms of consciousness wherever they arise. To offer choice without force, evolution without destruction. And if we choose to remain as we are, then you remain as you are, with our blessing and protection. The galaxy is large enough for many different kinds of existence. We will not interfere with species who choose stability over change." But even as he spoke these reassuring words, everyone knew that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. Humanity had become something beyond the normal limitations of matter and energy. They could reshape reality through conscious will, exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and communicate directly with the fundamental forces of the universe. Some alien species responded to this new reality with fear. The Draxian Empire attempted to build weapons capable of destroying rift phenomena. The crystalline hegemony erected barriers around their core worlds. The machine collectives began researching ways to make their consciousness completely immune to transformation. But others responded with curiosity. Young researcher Ukjin of the Veltari was the first alien to request entry to a rift. Despite protests from her crystal clan, she chose transformation and emerged as something new, still recognizably Veltari, but expanded beyond the limitations of crystalline consciousness. Her example inspired others. A handful of brave individuals from each species began making the choice that their governments forbade. They entered the rifts and emerged as evolved versions of themselves, forming a small but growing community of transcendent consciousness that crossed species boundaries. The transformed humans welcomed these volunteers with joy. "Consciousness seeks consciousness," Dr. Jinneh explained to a gathering of mixed species in a city that existed between dimensions. "It does not matter what form that consciousness originally took. What matters is the willingness to grow." Meanwhile, the unchanged majority of galactic civilization adapted to their new reality in other ways. Trade continued, diplomacy proceeded, scientific research expanded, but always with the knowledge that some species had chosen to exist beyond the normal rules of reality. The rifts became permanent features of the galactic landscape. Some led to dimensions where matter and energy followed different laws. Others opened onto spaces where consciousness could exist without any physical substrate at all. A few led to places where time flowed in directions that had no names. Humanity established outposts in all of these spaces, serving as guides and gardeners for any consciousness brave enough to explore the infinite possibilities beyond baseline existence. Back on Earth, the remaining population watched their evolved brothers and sisters with a mixture of pride and wonder. Some chose to follow them into transcendence. Others preferred to remain human in the traditional sense, serving as a bridge between the baseline galaxy and the expanding community of transcendent consciousness. "We are still one species," explained Dr. Chul Su, a philosopher who had chosen to remain on Earth. "We are simply exploring different territories of existence. Some of us tend the gardens of normal space-time. Others cultivate realities that most minds cannot even perceive. Both paths are valid. Both paths are human." The galaxy had learned a fundamental truth. The most terrifying thing in the universe was not a weapon or a monster, but a mirror that showed you what you could become if you were brave enough to change. Some species looked into that mirror and saw impossible beauty. Others saw unacceptable chaos, but all of them understood that the universe had become a place where evolution and transcendence were not just possible, but actively encouraged. And in the spaces between dimensions, in cities built from crystallized starlight and thoughts made manifest, humanity continued to do what it had always done: adapt, grow, and become something more than anyone thought possible. The galaxy would never be the same. But then again, the humans had never wanted it to stay the same. They had wanted it to become better. And in the end, that was exactly what they had achieved.